Hello, hello. This is Tammy Bronker, Sky Woman, and I'm going to do something a little different this time. We are 9 days into May when I'm speaking to you today, but I wanted to just give you 3 different themes that have been showing up for me, just to do something a little bit shorter and simple and clean and clear. The 3 themes that have been coming through when I'm looking at the energetics of May through the astrology. And when we dream into the most whole, coherent potential for this month and the part of the month that's still ahead. So, the first theme that came up was the theme Earth is resplendent. And when this came to me, I was walking yesterday, I was on a long walk, and I was just kind of asking to be shown what these themes were. They've been kind of bubbling up for a while. And this one, Earth was resplendent, even the word was kind of surprising to me, but no other word seemed to work. So, what I was shown and what I've been seeing and feeling for a very long time is the way that we can tune our frequency to the earth in such a way that we are really conscious of and operating within this earth from a place of seeing it as friendly and safe and whole and well. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't also recognize and see the places where there might be imbalances, or where, for example, this stream that's beneath me, there are impacts to this stream from farms up the road that are applying pesticides and fertilizers and have been working with this land for many years. So it's had an impact on this stream. The stream has an impact. So, but at the same time, when I tune into the resplendent nature of the stream and of this forest, then I don't allow my consciousness to be so wrapped up in and so attuned simply to the pain or to the distortion that I miss the reality that the majority of what's happening here is actually incredibly vibrant and full of life and generative. That is the larger field that we're operating inside of. So it's this kind of interesting thing of observing that, and that the idea being what Earth often shows me is that when we can tune into that station or that frequency, then it actually becomes far easier to come into this coherent place ourselves, and so that we are naturally and easily going to be a part of the solution. And when I say part of the solution, as many of you already know, that can show up in a lot of ways. For some of us, that can show up in really practical ways. That I'm in a pretty harmonious state myself, and that I'm actually being in relationship with this earth in such a way that it helps to feed a sense of harmony and peace inside of me, and that it's really attuned to beauty, such that when I'm speaking to my neighbor, the farmer, and naturally reaching out to him because I'm also seeing that beauty in him, that I'm not transmitting, I'm not in a relationship with him that feels adversarial or judgmental, that I'm naturally acknowledging and understanding the very good things that he's bringing as well. And so it can be very tangible and very practical like that, but also even more profoundly, I think, when we are tuning into what's beautiful. And we're also, I think that it's a nuanced thing, because we're tuning into what's whole, heal, and well, and we're also allowing ourselves to sense and feel and be present with those moments or those experiences or those spaces where all is not well, where there is pain, where there is difficulty, where there is challenge, where there is accumulated imbalance. So there's a way that we can get so oriented to what's wrong, is I think what the earth keeps trying to show me. And also that is something that can get really drilled into our minds so much from this kind of trauma brain, that causes us to see things in black and white, and causes us to either be kind of attempting to escape or attempting to fix everything around us, right? So that's the first piece, is Earth is resplendent. And it's like, it's just very, for anyone who, whether you live in a city or in the country, what I've noticed is when I live in cities, part of what will happen is that I notice that we are very, many of us, when we live close to a park, like a public park or a public area, those areas have a particular kind of magic and medicine that's different than when we're out in the country, in a place like this. So like when I'm here, I'm walking on gravel roads. But when I'm in a city, or when I'm in a town and I go to a trail, a nature trail, often that place is kind of designed more with humans in mind. And so there's more of a feeling of humans and the natural world in harmony together. So there's beauty in both places. It's just about connecting, it's about the importance of connecting in these ways. So Earth is resplendent, has a lot of other layers that I want to bring to mind, one of which is going to sound kind of radical and wild, but I've been seeing and feeling it for many years, which is that as we are moving even more deeply into this time where Saturn has been in Pisces, Neptune has been in Pisces, and they have been coming into a conjunction in this, straddling the line between Pisces and Aries and the Omega Alpha points, the beginning and the ending of the tropical zodiac, which is very relevant for our Western modern culture that has been kind of creating the dominant currents of our larger societal worldview. That as we are, as this larger happening is unfolding around us, that we get to dream a new dream. And as these two signs are moving into Aries, and then they'll be exactly conjunct next year, we're going to get to begin to take steps to make this, our visions and our dreams, into a reality. And so getting back again to that idea of Earth is resplendent, again, I keep also feeling, hearing, and knowing that she is, Mother Earth herself is far larger in her consciousness than our human technologies. Even though it may not look this way, there are many spiritual teachers and indigenous wisdom keepers who would remind us of that. We think we're in charge. We're not in charge. We are not in charge. There is a larger intelligence that is working through us, and of which we are a part. And this intelligence is in a cycle that is far larger than any individual being. But at the same time, ironically and paradoxically, this age change that we're in the midst of has to do with us actually realizing our great power, each of us individually, to be a part of this regenerative field of co-creation and of birthing new realities and new worlds. And so what I've been seeing is that particularly this year, from like around March of 2025 through about May of next year, while Saturn and Neptune are kind of moving back and forth between Pisces and Aries, and so they're like moving into Aries, moving back into Pisces. Both Saturn and Neptune are doing that, and then they're coming very close to conjunction this spring, and then they're going to be exactly conjunct next spring. In this period of time, it's kind of like wet cement. So it's like, we're in the zone of actually laying the cement, but it's the wet cement. And so we are kind of moving forward, moving backwards, but nothing's set yet. And so this is a time of great malleability. And that's why the way we respond in this moment and in this timing is so vital and so critical. And, recently it was so funny. I just had the insight this morning that there are as many Saturns as there are human beings, right? And the way that came through was just that we can understand that there is a Saturn of my heart. There is a Saturn that I can access through the principle of as within, so without, that the cosmos lives inside of me, and also outside of me. It's both and. It's not just one or the other. So there are some teachers that I subscribe to their perspective, which would say that if we are going to journey, if we're going to travel, if we are going to be in communion with a mystical, energetic, and archetypal energy, a living intelligence like Saturn, then the most appropriate way to do that is by traveling into our own energy field, by traveling into our own high heart, the kind of spiritual heart of our energetic nature, and so that we can commune with and be in relationship with and learn from this intelligence, this universal intelligence of Saturn. So we're learning about it in our own way. So each human would have a different frequency, a different tone, a different relationship with Saturn. And so, I'm speaking about it from my perspective. And so then anybody who's listening now, you have some level of resonance with my perspective. Not all of it, probably. Some of what I'm saying, you're going to be like, yeah, if you really listen, you'll be like, yeah, that feels resonant. And then you might feel like, well, and that part doesn't quite feel right. And that's how we want it to be, right? Isn't that we're lockstep, but that we are in communion and communication with each other and celebrating the places of distinction as well as connection. And how does this relate to Earth is very splendid. So basically what I had seen a number of years ago, and I've heard in other arenas, is that there are actually zones on this planet where new creations are actually birthed. So new species might be birthed in a certain kind of a portal or an energy zone on planet Earth. New ecosystems are continually being birthed. And this is kind of at a frequency or in a kind of zone that we don't fully understand in our more materialistic kind of mindset. But that's kind of happening, and that a lot of what gives birth to those things, well, some of it is much larger than we as human species, but also we do contribute to that through our consciousness and through our worldview and through our focus of attention and intention. The other thing that would come through around that is that I am nature, you are nature, we are Earth as well. And so there's been so much that's come through in the last number of years around helping us to move from this the challenge or the distortion of monotheism into the realization, the non-dual recognition, that everything is healing. That duality, polarity split is part of it. But interestingly, it's also that even as we come into greater intimacy and appreciation for the complexity of natural Earth systems, for example, we know more thanks to our current science about this ecosystem that I'm in right now. There are scientists, I can't remember the woman's name, but all the science that comes through now that helps us understand these networks of communication that are happening underneath my feet right now, where all of these trees are busy talking to each other through their root systems, through the mycorrhizal fungi, that there are these interlocking, very complex, beautiful, sacred, rich communities, ecosystems, conversations, relationships that are being fed all as I'm speaking to you. So we are in this matrix that is, we are in this living reality that is deeply complex. And we're starting to recognize that about our own bodies. As many of you already know, probably, as we learn to work with the fascia, or we learn to work with our somatic, the somatic layer of our human experience with greater respect and dignifying of that, we're doing that at the same time that many of us are also beginning to fall in love with Mother Earth again, and we're beginning to, or perhaps furthering our understanding of having a lifelong love affair with Mother Earth. And those two things are very much twinned. They're very much connected. So I'm all over the place here, I realize, but there's something about the near-death experiences that I've always really loved, and miracle, like spontaneous remissions and those kinds of processes. And the reason I've always been fascinated by that is because it helps me to understand that we as human beings have the capacity to automatically and miraculously heal ourselves. And that doesn't mean that that's always the appropriate thing. It's just as appropriate for a person to die. And again, this is the non-dual way of thinking that we're practicing, that it's not good, bad, but it's more opening into curiosity about what's possible is my interest here. So we're in a process of massive deathing. And that's all this, completion of the Pisces degrees and Saturn and Neptune. And that deathing process can involve profound levels of grief and loss and sorrow and disappointment or disillusionment. All those things can be real. And we can have a lot of heaviness in heavy layers in this passage. And at the same time, there also is this surging forward of this beautiful and present new kind of undercurrent of peace and stillness under all of it, that if we stop and slow down a little bit, we actually can feel often. And sometimes that's what we feel after we had the really potent or the really overwhelming dark night of the soul, or this feeling of hopelessness and despair, that what comes after is this sense of hopefulness and brightness. Of course, those are the natural cycles. But Earth is resplendent is what came through. And again, my sense is I've long had dreams and visions that our oceans would repopulate themselves with new species and ancient species, and that this would happen more rapidly than we can imagine. That's also when I've had dreams that showed waterways or pools of water or deep water sources that suddenly were teeming with a great vibrancy and color and diversity of different types of species. When I've had dreams like that, it's been a dream that holds that awareness that our Earth is rebirthing herself. So when I say Earth is resplendent, I feel she's much more powerful than we know. It doesn't mean we don't need to respect her. It doesn't mean that we don't need to care for her, much as we care for our own bodies. We wouldn't, even if we know that our bodies are miraculous and that we can heal ourselves, and even if we know that working at the subtle levels of energy healing, for example, or using the potency of our imagination and thought to heal our bodies, that is incredibly, incredibly powerful, and that we can heal ourselves that way. Even as we know that, and we also know that our state of consciousness can be a healing medicine on the earth, as with the physical care of our bodies, same with the physical care of our earth, there is the need to acknowledge and honor the 3D mineral material realm. And so it's a balancing of those energetic and physical bodies, of our own physical bodies and our spirits and Mother Earth's as well. Again, because there's a kind of a hologrammatic nature to that. Not that we're not real, because I actually do feel we are real in a sense, but that there's this reciprocal kind of relationship. So Earth is resplendent is number one. Number two is we can have it as we want it. We can have it as we want it was what came through. And I've been actually feeling and seeing this for a while now, but it felt relevant on the level of this Scorpio full moon and of Taurus season. Of course, because in May we have the first 20 days of May are in the sign of Taurus, and then we've got the Scorpio full moon. So when we're looking at and working with the energetics of Taurus and Scorpio, and then we are working with life force energy, and we are working with the power of desire and pleasure and giving and receiving, and those energetics that are very much about the eros of this living creation. And how is it that we can, I've spoken about this in another video, but how is it that we, in the words of the Greeks, if we've become out of balance, and through all this passage through Pisces and a kind of world weariness, if we have been overly focused on Thanatos, or kind of the death urge, or, sometimes that part of us that just wants to just crawl in a hole and just take a long nap, nothing wrong with that, by the way. But sometimes we can find ourselves in that place for a little too long, and then it's time, I think, to do what it takes to bring alive more of a sense of eros, or connect with our own eros, which might be in very simple ways. Lately, I've been doing a practice through this course that I'm taking that it's working with the lunar channels, and it's so simple. It's just this breath that is very slow and very conscious, and it just ensures that I'm continually connecting into the lower centers of my body in a very simple way, but I do it every night, and it's just extraordinary because it is so simple, but it helps my body feel this very simple pleasure of presence, right? So it doesn't, and I think a lot of times, interestingly, in our current moment, when we think of eros, sometimes it's like, I've got to do this very intensive pleasure practice, or something very complex to connect into my sexy side or whatever. And I think that can be wonderful. I love that. And that is not to say we don't need to do that. And sometimes it can be even simpler. Sometimes it's as simple as just loving presence and awareness in the body, particular regions of the body, like almost like blessing with our presence the different layers of the body, bringing our awareness inside the body, right? Because I know for a long time I didn't have that awareness within my body. I've done a lot of work to feel the aliveness in my body itself. So we can have it as we want it. It has to do with Eros in that larger energetic sense. And so in the season of Taurus and Scorpio, the time of Beltane, that energy is really highlighted and encouraged. And also in the larger sense, what I was really shown when I came back from Ireland this last year, because I'd been really challenged in a lot of my old thinking, was that the most difficult thing for me would be my addiction to discomfort and struggle as a way of growth. I felt that on my flight back home, where I was asking myself, what if this world that we've all been praying for, and this spiritual growth and awakening and open-heartedness and peace and harmony, what if it's already unfolding? And if it is, can I actually kind of accept that? Can I let down my guard for a moment and attune to that and celebrate that and be in harmony with that and really see and feed that with my attention and my awareness? And when I started to do that, then I also recognized the part of my mind that was like, nope, that's not okay. And I was immediately seeking out these kind of conflicts, that, this person is of this race, and so they might be having this experience of oppression. And so I'm going to try to take care of that in my mind for them, or assume that they're victimized, or, I didn't even realize. I was like, oh, I'm assuming everyone's victimized. I'm assuming everything's bad. And there's something in my brain that got twisted that way. And when I say twisted, I don't mean to suggest that there isn't absolutely, especially in this moment, a need to acknowledge when it is organic, in the moment, when it is to acknowledge and bring our awareness to those places in our personal lives and in the collective where clearly we are seeing coming to a head and very visible the deep damage of systems of racism and of oppression and of economic, inequity and all of these layers. So it's not that I'm saying that the awareness of that isn't important. I think more of what I'm saying is that there are some of us who have been so attuned to that for so long that it might actually be that there are other people right now who are waking up to that. And it's really important for them to be able to wake up to that and kind of balance their other ways of seeing with that. And even though it might be important for us, obviously, to maintain a true connection to our values and stand in that, it also may be important for us to balance it with a kind of a curiosity and an open-mindedness. Like maybe these changes are happening in ways that I don't fully understand. But going back to that example of flying back from Ireland, what I had experienced there was when I kind of softened and I allowed myself just to be very present to what was happening around me and really authentically tuning in from the heart, I could see and feel that people were very kind to one another. People of every race and every economic kind of background and the genders, and people were just kind. And I was blown away by the generosity, the kindness, it was just actually quite stunning. And I actually realized there was a part of me that was uncomfortable. It was like a discomfort with almost asking the question, but if everything's already unfolding as it should, then what's my job? Maybe I'm out of a job. Because I've always thought I was supposed to fix it. So, there's a part of me that's like, what if I don't have to fix anything? Oh my gosh, what am I going to do then? What am I going to get paid for? What will set me apart? So, and again, I'm not saying that to say that we're actually not moving into a time where we can more actively, with Saturn moving into Aries after Neptune, that we can more actively take action and affect change in positive ways very constructively together. I just think that the motivation is coming from a different place. The motivation is coming from a place of hopefulness. The motivation is coming from a place of congruency and of honoring of difference and of seeing the strength in our different ways of seeing things and of healing some of the divisions that have become so weaponized, against us and all of life. So those are some of the things that have been coming through for me. Okay, so that's the second is we can have things as we want them. And so again, when I say that, let me actually back up for a moment. It's to suggest that what we want is already happening. And again, I mean this in the earth realm as well as the human realm. And then I want to bring that also into the personal to say, and this is a message for the people pleasers or those of us who kind of tend towards these patterns of self abandonment, all you Chiron and Aries people, if you express it that way, that there is, or people with Libra moons and South nodes, there's all kinds of places it shows up, or Cancer, South node, moon. There are a lot of ways it shows up. Pisces, Virgo, there's a million ways. But basically, if we are operating from a place where we don't take responsibility for what we authentically want, even if that changes from moment to moment, in the level that we're just really honestly and earnestly kind of asking, well, where is life pulling me? What is feeling alive and vibrant for me? And even I would go so far as to say, what kind of future do I want to live into for myself? What kind of life do I want to live? Because the universe loves us too. We're part of it, and so we get to include ourselves in the prayer. And so for some of us, it's a radical concept to include others in the prayer. And for some of us, it's a radical concept to include ourselves. And, depending on our time of life or whatever's going on, sometimes it can go back and forth, right? So it's about balance, like everything else. But this idea that we can have it as we want it. It might sound bizarre when we look at the world around us right now, but I would say that even more than ever before, getting really honest and curious about what is outworn for us, about what is no longer alive for us, what no longer has juice for us, and being willing to acknowledge that and then move in the direction, even if at first it feels a little raw and fresh and unknown. It is not a time for us to stay stuck in patterns that don't have life in them. And this doesn't have to be some big dramatic thing. It can be daily. In fact, I think that that's even more powerful. And I've found that for myself a lot, this kind of daily practice, that it's somewhat in the moment of building on what feels alive and beautiful and emergent now, and also looking to the future. I've got to be brave enough to kind of ask, what do I want my life to look like in the future? I actually think that's very healthy, because I think that if we feel blocked around any kind of idea about what the future could look like, or any of the specifics of that, then in some way we, with our human consciousness and imagination, I think it's part of our job actually to make a vote through our imagination, through our vision, through what we speak about, through what we focus our attention on. We get our vote on the kind of future that we want. And so I actually think it's part of our responsibility to dream into the future and to pray and dream into the future and practice seeing that it can unfold in a beautiful way. That's actually, to me, that feels immensely responsible, hugely responsible. Okay. And then the third one, and this again is somewhat has to do with the big Saturn movement, Saturn moving into Aries. And I've already been talking a little bit about that, but that is the big event of the month, is May 24th. Saturn is moving into Aries for the first time in about 28 years. And so that's a big event, and it's crossing that threshold of into the world axis, 0 degrees Aries, that I've talked about a million times. But what the phrase I got for that was, change can be gentle. Change can be gentle. Okay, this might sound so strange for me to say this right now when it feels like the change is all so dramatic. And I'm not going to say that there hasn't been plenty of dramatic change. But what I mean by this is, it goes back to this idea that of apocalypse, or of the ways that, okay, think about how a child who has gone through a lot of trauma. Many of us experience at least complex trauma growing up, and I don't want to equate that to massive those are different things, but many of us now know the effect of trauma on the brain and on the nervous system and the way we operate in the world. And when we as humans come into the world with a tremendous amount of unhealed trauma, then we expect that there's a part of us that's always hypervigilant and is always kind of expecting that something terrible is going to happen. It's like the sky is falling syndrome, right? Like these old stories have some important pearls of wisdom for us. So it's just this whole like, wow, like everything's terrible, everything's scary. And I think a lot of us operate in this way all the time. And, cortisol levels in our current reality, just because, so again, when I'm saying this, I don't mean to diminish that there are plenty of people right now who are really feeling challenged by our economy here in the US and by layoffs and all these other things. So I don't mean to diminish that kind of 3D reality of what's going on. However, what I am saying is that, once again, kind of like with the last point, if we are moving through the world from that kind of traumatized state of hypervigilance and urgency and the high cortisol levels, then we tend to be so contracted and tight in it's even like the firing between the right and the left hemispheres of the brain isn't quite as effective. And so we get shut down and we're not available for the opportunities that arise around us. We're not available for that. And so again, it's to have deep compassion for the reasons why this is, and that this can be very challenging to get out of these cycles. But more what I want to say is, I'm not just talking about the human, I'm also talking micro, macro. I'm saying that we have been taught that when a civilization collapses, our stories, our books, our movies have all trained our minds to believe that that's like a zombie apocalypse. Like it's this horrific thing that has to happen in order for, change to happen. It's almost like a part of us thinks we deserve that. That would be what I would propose, is a part of us thinks that we deserve that. And my sense is that, yes, I'm speaking from the heart of empire, right? So of course I'm going to want to believe something different. But my sense is that we do drive the consciousness around us with our belief systems when it comes to this kind of thing. We do play a role. And I will continue to subscribe to the idea that we are in the middle of an age change and hospicing of an old age and a midwifing of a very important and a necessary massive shift and change. And what I would actually say is that we have already been through the horrors. We have already been moving through them. If we don't see that happening now in Gaza, if we don't see that through the epidemic of suicide and health issues and deep depression and violence here in the US, for example, and massive health, economic inequities. I mean, it's a different kind of suffering in the US. It's a soul sickness that many people feel than what you see in Gaza, where there's a very, and I don't mean to say one is good and one is bad. It's certainly not the case. So I want to be very careful when I speak to that, because they're actually related. They're very much related. It's because of the spiritual illness within the US and in this modern culture that so many of us are grappling with, where the society that's been constructed around us has, and that we've helped to construct, hasn't built in the sacred. It hasn't been built into our reality, and it's necessary. There's a lot of other layers to that, but my sense is that when I remember I was listening at one point to a story about Catalhoyuk, which was a civilization that they were studying. They were doing archaeological digs, and one of the archaeologists or the scholars was speaking about the way that they've started to understand that in a civilization, when it collapses, it happens very slowly, actually. And that it's just a natural process. People start moving out into the country more. They start to just leave these big centers behind, and that it actually takes time. This is a process that takes time. And so, when I started to think about that, I started thinking, how can change be slow and effective? And I think that it's already happening. And I think that on the personal level, I'll just say for myself personally that at the end of January, I had a concussion, and it was a pretty good bonk, in my head. And I went through a whole journey with that I've talked about in other places, but it caused me to go through a whole healing journey where, and this is often the case, I'd had a similar hit when I was 16. So this hit, it kind of brought up what had happened before. It was a kind of a repeat in a sense, but it was an opportunity to do deeper healing for both events. And so at this stage, I've been going through a lot of healing with an osteopath, and certain cleanses and support for the brain and for my eyes. And so it's been interesting to try to create the space around that, and how my body it does need more time. My eyes need more time to just be quiet and slow so that my body can heal. But what I've noticed is that what happens inside of me is that when I see how everything continues to accelerate in the outer reality, especially when I really am tuning into the news, or, and I'm not saying don't, because for some of you out there listening, it's for you to do that. So again, we're each individually different people. But I'll just say, when I allow myself to be flooded in a way that hijacks my nervous system with the outer reality and the news cycle that is designed to always try to grab our attention, and more and more and more and more and more, when I absorb or pull into that in such a way that it just kind of destabilizes me, then I feel guilty, or I feel bad about doing this healing process. And that's problematic, because then what I noticed myself doing was actually kind of jumping forward and trying to make decisions or trying to make things happen in such a way that later I had to kind of go back and try to clean it up. I was kind of making a mess because I was coming at it from a place of urgency instead of kind of stability. And again, this isn't a judgment. It's just, I think probably many of us have had a similar kind of experience. And so I've had to remind myself again and again and again to allow myself that space and time for the natural healing. And it's not a black and white thing, again, because some of that reaching out or some of that taking action was appropriate. And yet at the same time, my sense is that when I slow down more, then I'm more attuned and I'm more present, and I'm actually recognizing where a true need is arising, versus trying to kind of colonize it, or kind of like come from up above and say, I got to fix this thing, right? Like fix the thing that's wrong. And as I'm completing today, I want to just say that this also relates to a craniosacral session I received today. It's actually an osteopath I'm going to, but I'm getting a lot of really deep level craniosacral healing work. And today we were talking about the difference between chiropractic and craniosacral therapy. And I have a little sister and a former partner who are craniosacral therapists, and I shouldn't say little, she's quite big. She's quite sacred, beautiful, and wise healer. But I have a sister and a former partner who are both deeply gifted craniosacral therapists. And so I really honor this healing modality. But what my DO my practitioner was sharing with me today was that when you do chiropractic, like if we were to do chiropractic to support my head, because I can feel sometimes it's like, my spine was impacted, and so that maybe I'm not getting the downloads I want to get, because of course I really care about that. I'm blocked, spiritually sometimes. I'm worried about that. But what she was saying is, if she were to do even the most gentle chiropractic, what happens with that is that she's making something happen in the body. And then the way she said it that I loved was, it's the what is it, ODD, the defiant, it's like some kind of defiant disorder. I can't remember the terminology for it, but it's a thing where the body is like, when you do something to the body and say, do this, not that, then the body automatically, it's going to take the shape of the way it's supposed to be, but then it's going to kind of rebel and go back to the way it was before. Because it's just kind of this natural F you, like, I'm going to do it my way, right? Like any of us, if something's coming at us from outside of us and trying to change us in some way, shape, or form, we don't tend to like that. So then craniosacral is very different. It's such a very gentle modality where she's putting her hands in place and sometimes even working energetically to support the body and be in a communion and attunement with the body, to support the body in naturally releasing and unwinding in such a way that the corrections are naturally made, because our body wants to heal, but it wants to be deeply respected in the process of healing. And so I would go so far as to say also, again, that as our earth comes into balance and as our human society and our human family and the family of life comes into greater balance after a time of imbalance, that, and as we are healing in a sense, that the change can be slow. And it's like another phrase in somatic healing, that there's two phrases I really love, that go slow to go fast. And I feel that with my healing journey now. I'm practicing greater consistency with practices in the morning of Qigong and journaling and meditation. And when I go to sleep at night, also the lunar channel process that really puts me in my body, soothes my nervous system. I'm weaving a lot of consistency into my life that I hadn't had before. And then I'm also going slower, trying to let myself do less and give myself permission, so that when I show up in my community and for my neighbors or my family or my larger global family, the woman in Gaza who reaches out to me, when I'm actually showing up for my clients, for my family, in my professional realm, that I can do so from a place of good grounding and actual attunement. So to me, that increasingly feels like self-responsibility. And as somebody who comes from a good, middle America, literally kind of from the Calvinist sort of root of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and what we most value is doing the hard work, I bless that. Like, I love it. It's amazing. And it's actually a good balance to some other trends. And at the same time, really grateful that I myself and many of us now are moving into a place where we recognize that going slow can help us to actually go faster when we get into alignment. In any case, that's the 3, not quite as short as I had hoped it would be, but hopefully this is supportive for you. And I want to send you so much love for the remainder of May, a very action-packed month in a way. I say action-packed meaning, that might not be the right term actually, but that there's this big movement. The Saturn movement's big, and again, the Scorpio full moon and this Taurus Beltane kind of energetic that we still feel this time of year here in the north. And and also for those friends in the south, there's still, with the sign of Taurus, I would suggest, even though for you it's fall and it's moving into winter, that with more of the Samhain kind of energetics, that there's still this eros and this aliveness that we're invited into. So I'm going to complete now, and I hope you'd enjoy just getting the vibes here in the Manitou County Emerald Triangle area, as I refer to it. And I want to just send you so much love and much blessing. Until next time, this is Tammy, or Sky Woman.